guys, it's Sierra, your host,
Hi, it's Joanna, your co-host.
and you're listening to the Color of Home podcast. Hey guys, what's up? We're so happy you're here. Welcome to the Color of Home podcast. Today we have a super special guest with us.
All the way from Ontario, Canada. This guest, I would say, it's basically my brother. We grew up together in Papua New Guinea in the dorm, and we're so excited to have Josh Gowd with us. Hi, Josh. We're so excited to have you here with us. Could you just give us a brief introduction of who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Josh Gowd. I grew up in Papua New Guinea with these two, and we all went to school together. I was in the dorm with Joanna, and then once I graduated, I moved back to Ontario, Canada, and that's where I live currently.
Yeah, so Josh and I, we both grew up in the dorm together. We're really close. We've met each other a few times on this side of the world, right? Like, I think Josh is probably the one MK I've seen the most. Yeah, I think we've met several times.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we've played like beach volleyball together.
I mean, we just met up and like gone to movies and different things. Like,
Yeah,
we met up in Hamilton a couple of times, and then Calgary, and
right.
like wherever your aunt was.
Yeah,
Yeah, right?
Georgetown, Ontario. Yeah.
Middle of nowhere.
Yeah, no, it's not. Hey, it's really close to the Greater Toronto area. So, Josh, I know that you mentioned you grew up in Papua New Guinea. Could you just give us a little, just explain to us where in Papua New Guinea you grew up and a little bit more about your life of coming to Papua New Guinea and when you came?
Yeah, so my parents have been missionaries with Ethnos 360, formerly New Tribes Mission, for a long time. Mom's going on, I want to say like 36 years or something like that. And my parents met there. So I was actually born in Papua New Guinea, and then I was homeschooled for the first probably 4 or 5 years of my life. And then after that, I was going to the boarding school at the mission base where we had. And then when we were home on furlough, then I went to different schools in Canada for I did something in the realm of like 2nd grade, 4th grade, and 8th grade in Canada when we were home for furloughs. And yeah, so I've spent the better part of 18 years in Papua New Guinea. And then for the last 10, I've lived in and around London, Ontario.
Wow. So do you have dual citizenship then? Are you a citizen of PNG since you were born there?
I can choose one or the other. Canada doesn't offer the ability to get dual citizenship. So a lot of my friends who are from the States who were born there, they were able to get dual, but I can't.
Okay.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that Canada doesn't allow dual citizenship.
Yeah, I didn't
As far
know.
as I know, yeah. I haven't looked into it in a long time, but that's what I was told.
So you're Canadian, your citizenship.
Yeah, Canadian citizenship.
Where in Papua New Guinea were you born? Like what area?
I was born in the Nazarene Hospital in Kujip, which is near Mount Hagen.
Wow, that's crazy.
You're probably one of the few missionary kids out there that have actually been born in Papua New Guinea. That's crazy.
So what was life like there for you?
I grew up in a tribe called Wusarambia, and that was where my parents were doing their church planting ministry. So for the first, like I said, 4 or 5 years of schooling up until about age 9 or 10, I was in basically the jungle in the middle of nowhere. So it was about 35 minutes flight from the nearest somewhat decent sized town, and pretty secluded. Our direct village, I can't think of how many people would be there, but it's very, very rural. So that's where my parents were doing their church planting ministry. And then from there, once the church was planted and had kind of like started to go out on its own, then they started the Bible translation process.
Yeah, that's great. How do you think growing up in the tribe has affected you as an adult now? Is there any impacts in your life that you still see today from that?
I definitely think it expanded my worldview a lot. Even just the fact that other than the one family that we grew up with, they were pretty much the only Caucasian people that I grew up with. And so I think that definitely gave me a different worldview. And even just the fact that like it was, again, like a very, very rural area. I didn't really wear shoes until I was like 10 years old practically.
Yeah.
And so just very different growing up. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Again, it just teaches you to see different cultures, different people, and kind of just take a walk in other people's shoes so you can understand where they're coming from rather than judging everything from your own worldview. And I think that's definitely something that I've carried into like my life now. And even, just like sometimes I feel like it affects me more, and then other times I feel like it affects me less. But yeah, it definitely gave some valuable life skills.
How old were you, did you say, when you came to Lopulo?
So originally we were living at Sabega, which was like the other missionary base.
Wait, you lived at Sabega?
Yeah, I was at Sabega.
Okay, that's where my parents did ministry for like majority of my time there. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how I met you.
What?
Yes.
I was there when you were there?
Yeah.
Wait, how long were you there?
We were there on and off from 2009 to 12.
Okay, so you might have been like leaving like maybe the time I was arriving.
Pretty close. We overlapped by 1 year.
A whole year. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so we lived at Sabega for a while, and it was a bit of juggling because my dad was still going to and from the tribe doing ministry, and then my mom was kind of just taking care of the house and the kids and all that kind of stuff, and she was helping out where she could. But Dad was doing the majority of the like church planting and work, and at the time he was teaching through. I think at that point he was still helping teach through the chronological teaching of Christ. So a lot of translating lessons, working with people to make sure that the meaning was preserved and all that kind of stuff. So even their approach to the Bible lessons, everything that they were translating was basically around the chronological teaching of Christ, so that they could get those lessons in a format where they could teach all the way through it. So yeah, I was at Sabega for about 1.5 years initially. And so I did like the second, maybe it was about 2.5 years, because I think I was there from like the end of 3rd grade until the end of 6th grade. And then we came home for my 7th grade year. No, it had to have been the end of 7th. So I think about 5th to 7th grade, I was at Sabega. And then when my sister graduated, we came home for a year to get her settled into school and to be home for a furlough. So I spent 8th grade here. And then for all of high school, I was in different dorms. So initially I spent 2 years in the Bittner dorm and then 2 years in the Woodard dorm.
Wow. That's a lot of transitions when it's hard to remember what year and where you were at. Yeah, that's a lot, but awesome.
So I know you said your parents were doing translation in this tribe. Are they still currently working with the same tribe, or are they retired now?
Yeah. So they have kind of stepped away from the teaching side of things because the church is pretty self-sufficient now. Like they have established their own elders, and they've got I think 2 or 3 people that are kind of in charge of doing the teaching on Sunday mornings, etc. And they've got different Sunday school leaders and all that kind of stuff. So Mom and Dad have been able to kind of step away from that role a little bit and focus more on translating the Bible. So they still step in and they help where they can, but their big goal before retirement is to finish translating the New Testament in its entirety. So they've got the rough draft done of all the books, I believe, and I can't remember what percentage they're at as far as like fully translated, but I think it's somewhere in the realm of like the 70% mark. So their big goal is to finish up the rest of the books of the New Testament and have that in a format where they can print it out and give it to the people before they retire. So that's the big goal.
A little bit about Josh's parents. When I think of your parents, I honestly think of like dedication. I remember my parents and I talking, and they were saying that your parents' language that they had to learn is probably one of the hardest languages that our mission has. Like, it's such a complex language, and the fact that they are still sticking to it to trying to translate the Bible and get it into the word for the people, that's amazing. I just can't believe, like, so many missionaries have, like they've had to go on home assignment or they've had to quit for certain reasons. But I think your parents, there's so many times they could have quit or gone home for their kids or different things, but they have stuck to it. Honestly, every time I hear that they're still sticking to it, I'm like, that's amazing. God called them to this, and this is something that they're still pressing on. So that's a little bit about Josh's parents, and they're amazing people.
Yeah. And how do you think as a kid that has affected you? So like Joanna was saying, how most people end up leaving or going back for their kids. Were there any moments in your life where you wished, like, man, I wish my parents were just here with me over in Canada? Or were you fully on board?
I think with my parents, it was it was a pretty good understanding that we had that if, things got desperate and I really needed the help, then they would be willing to show up and help. And I think that was an important thing to know, because if that wasn't the case, then I think it would have been harder. And don't get me wrong, like there was definitely times where it crossed my mind to be like, hey, like I need you guys now. But I also understood that the work that they were doing is super important, and I didn't want them to have to quit that on my behalf. And so it's kind of a two-way street, like it was that open communication that, I knew I could ask them to come home if I really needed it, especially like post high school, like, you have the culture shock of moving to a new country, being in a new place, and even just like, settling into the workplace and going to school and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot to figure out, like even just simple things like how do you do your taxes in Canada and different life skills that, again, I'd never done. And even like, buying a car, learning to drive, like getting your own insurance, like all these things that, like, again, if I was here, I probably at 18 would have dealt with already. I would have probably had my full license. I probably would have been able to, figure out insurance and all that kind of stuff, but I'd never done it. So all those kinds of things, like it was a little bit of, I was pretty blessed to have my parents home for the first year that I was finished high school anyways. So a lot of those things we were able to do while they were still here. But even then there was definitely times where I'd call them up, and especially with my dad, I'd just be like, hey, like how on earth do I do this? I have no idea. And so the ability to be able to call them or even just FaceTime them and be like, hey, like I don't know how to do this life skill. Can you help me out? That definitely made a difference. But my dad's entire family is around this area as well, so that helps. Like my aunts and uncles and grandparents were all around the area, so if I really needed to reach out to somebody, I knew that I could. And even a couple of the churches that are big supporters of my parents, they're also in the area, so I knew that at the very least we had some family friends that could help out if I really got stuck in a situation where I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I think like that communication from the parents, like, hey, if you really need us, like we will step aside for you. I think that's like really good for parents to communicate that, because you were saying like a lot of missionary kids, I feel they might feel guilty, like they're doing this amazing work. Like I feel so guilty if I'm the one causing them to step away from that. Like no longer people are going to be saved or have the Bible because of me and my problems. But I think that's a big weight to put on a child, and they do need their parents, and we do need them for certain things like transitioning back into our home cultures. So I just think that communication is very needed from them. Like you said, your parents did a great job. Mine did a great job of that as well. And they're, yes, a phone call away, but sometimes they would be sleeping when we're awake, but I knew my parents would answer me no matter what. So I think that's what helps make that transition a little bit easier.
So, Josh, you mentioned with your parents still doing their ministry. So, I know that you were in the dorm. So, could you tell us a little bit about how, like, just the first time in the dorm and then being away from your parents and going on school breaks back to the tribe and like being reunited with your parents?
Yeah, so I mean, the way that the dorms functioned there, like we had quite a number of kids that all stayed in a dorm together, and then there was a family that was in charge of taking care of us. And so initially I was in the Bittner dorm, and I can't remember exactly how many we had, but it was somewhere in the realm of like 12 or 13 kids, and then the two parents. So it was busy for sure. I was in the dorm with my two older brothers, and we all shared a room. So that was definitely an adjustment, because it's not a lot of space for three guys all sharing space. But all of us by this point in life had kind of gotten along well enough that it wasn't too crazy of an adjustment. I would say like some of the bigger things were just like, when the older two had a lot of homework to do, I was the one, trying to fall asleep with the light on while they worked on homework and stuff like that. So there definitely were struggles, but overall, like our dorm experience together with the three of us was quite good. I didn't find it was like a crazy transition. I think partially because my brothers were there, like it was weird not seeing my parents on the daily and that kind of stuff. But the dorm that we were in was really good. And I also had some other friends that, I could go over to their place and kind of crash and hang out and that kind of stuff. So that really helped as well, to be able to just, get out of the dorm if it was getting too stressful or I just needed a different space. So that definitely helped. But yeah, like I said, I didn't feel like it was a crazy adjustment getting into the dorm, even as a ninth grader. Like, I know some people really struggled with being away from their parents on the regular, but again, like I would say we probably we probably talked on the phone like at least 3 or 4 times a week. So I was in pretty constant communication with my parents still. So as much as I couldn't see them in person, at least, I knew they weren't like that crazy far away if I really needed them.
You gotta talk to them on the phone.
Mhm.
I talk to
Uh,
them on the radio, an FM radio, every Sunday.
Yeah, it was on and off. Like by that point, we had just gotten to the point where we had cell service in the tribe, but it wasn't consistent. Like the generator would go, or who knows what other thing would happen, and suddenly the service would be out. So like when it was there, it was awesome, and when it wasn't, then we'd have to go back to doing the radio. But honestly, most of the time, when the cell phone service wasn't that great, we would just email because it was easier than trying to do the radio.
Yeah, I do know that like when I hear when people just talk about boarding school, I think they think about it in more of a negative light. But I think for us on our mission, like we had positive experiences. Like honestly, those were the best times of my life.
The dorm was a cool place to be. I remember asking my parents, can I please go to the dorm and live in the dorm? And they were like, no, we live right here. I was like, but my friends are there. And I think everyone's just friends, and all the dorm parents were so fun. So yeah.
And I think that's how it was. Like I said, I was very blessed with the dorm parents that I had for all 4 years of high school. Like, I know some people didn't have the best dorm experience, but yeah, for me, I'm like, as much as there were struggles here and there were things to work through, like in general, the dorm was in general a pretty good place to go to hang out, to kind of just like socialize and all that kind of stuff. And the dorm parents were good with other people coming over. So even times where we, have people over, watch a movie, play games, whatever, even just like setting up computers and getting all the LAN cords plugged in and gaming together, like it was good times.
We would sit on countertops and like stay up till so late eating snacks with our dorm sister Allie and chatting about school and the drama and like how hard homework was.
We definitely put in our hours, that's for sure.
Yeah, we'd be up to like 3 a.m. every single night.
Yeah.
At least I would.
Every time we would get to the end of a term and all the projects and exams would come due, and it was like, oh, I guess we should probably work on it in the last week.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I guess it's time to do that.
Yeah, a positive thing in the dorm, I love that I had older dorm siblings that all literally had done the exact same schooling the year before. So
Yeah, except that all of us had forgotten stuff, so you'd have 3 seniors all trying to figure out how to do algebra.
yes, yeah, those are the days.
Yeah, I mean, even our dorm was like a pretty inclusive atmosphere overall. Like we did chores together and all that kind of stuff, and like it just made it fun. Like things that ordinarily wouldn't be enjoyable actually became enjoyable. So like even like we had stuff like dish crew that if you were all out there together, you just crank music, and again, it's still chores, but it made it enjoyable. So depending on what job you got, it didn't really matter. Everybody was kind of just hanging out. You can crank music, you can chat, all that kind of stuff, and just have a really good time together doing something that is still kind of like a menial task, but it becomes a lot more fun when you got the right people around you.
Yeah, I remember us just also like having like, I think there was like a Thanksgiving dinner or something where our dorm mom was like, okay, everybody's making a dish, and like we all had to make something for this, and it was so fun because there's I don't know how many of us in the kitchen making like 5, 6, 7, 8 different desserts, and it was just it was so fun. But yeah, it was good times.
So let's talk about some of the rules that maybe the dorm might have had. Are there any curfews that you guys had, or if your parents had a list of things they wanted you to follow, was that up to the dorm parents at the time to implement? How did that kind of work?
It was definitely a bit of a mix. Like I think certain parents had certain rules that they wanted the dorm parents to kind of enforce with their own particular children. There were some that were like universal, like dorm rules. I remember even in the first couple of years in being in the dorm, we tried to have a fairly strict evening curfew. And so basically like we had 2 different ends. Like we had one end for the girls, one end for the guys. Essentially like past a certain time in the evening, we'd have to be on our own end of the dorm, kind of in our rooms. And so that I remember being a little bit challenging, especially because, like early on in high school, I was rooming with both my brothers. So when they had to be on their own end, they had to be in our room. And that's where, again, if we're doing homework, etc., like as a 9th grader, I didn't have nearly the workload that they did. And so like there'd be a lot of times where like I was, packed up and ready for bed, and they still had, a couple hours ahead of them. So those kinds of things definitely made it a little bit more challenging. But yeah. I think it was definitely a bit of a mixed bag as far as like dorm rules versus own personal rules.
Yeah, I had all the rules. My parents had rules that they they placed on the dorm parents to force upon me. There was just different things because I think each parent, they know their children. So sometimes like, oh, my child needs more sleep. So can you make sure that their bedtime, it may be different than what the dorm curfew is. And like you may be coming home earlier than the other kids because your parents just like know you better. So yeah, there's things like that. The dorm parents would sometimes write the parents and be like, okay, this is what we're doing. Can we have an exception for this specific time? Like whether we're having a dorm party or whatever it was, that was just the dorm family, like kind of like connecting us. We had events that would just connect us. So I think that there was a lot of communication between the parents of the kids and then the dorm parents too. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel like that would be difficult if you're not used to a certain way of life, having to adapt to that and being around people 24/7. Like, I'm a people person, but there's your days, maybe you had a bad day at school, you just want to go in your room and cry. I don't know, girls are like that. I don't know about guys, but
Not so much, but I definitely understand needing your own space.
yeah, your space. And I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure like being with your brothers all the time, like that was difficult as well. I can imagine. So yeah, pros and cons for sure.
You just cried in front of each other, I think, and then people comfort you. You had to learn how to be vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, we were all going through a lot of the same stuff together, so it definitely helped to have friends that were around.
Yeah, that's a great point. You guys are all going through the same thing, so everyone, I'm sure, understands what you're going through.
So I know you were in the dorm for several years. So what year did you graduate, and what were some of the feelings and like thoughts you had while you were like in your last year of being in Papua New Guinea, or maybe thinking about transitioning back to Canada?
For me, it was definitely like very mixed feelings. Like, I feel with any missionary kid, like when we're finishing up high school, there's that feeling of loss of, like I'm leaving my home country. And especially for me, because I was born there, like it really was home and still is home. And so coming home to Canada, like there was definitely things that I was looking forward to. Like I'm very much like somebody who enjoys first world amenities, like, fast internet, etc. So like there were definitely things that I was looking forward to about Canada, but there's definitely a huge feeling of loss. So I feel like everybody who grew up as a missionary kind of experienced that after high school, whereas like, you're leaving your home behind, you're leaving all your friends, and even just the feeling of, like I'm leaving my entire class that I've done however many grades with and have gotten really close with, I'm leaving them permanently, and there's a pretty good chance I won't see any of them again. And so there's definitely a very, very big feeling of loss. But for me, like I said, like it was a bit mixed. Like when I was home for 8th grade, like I definitely made some really good friends around here that I was looking forward to seeing. But I feel like everybody kind of goes through that a little bit after high school regardless, because of the fact that you don't know where people are going to school and that kind of stuff. Even for me, I feel like there was a bit of an adjustment period when I got back, because I was kind of like, oh, this would be cool. I'll reconnect with all my friends when I got here. And then it's, you get through summer and everybody heads off to university, and well, no one's actually around here anyways. So for me, it was definitely like there were definitely like big adjustments that needed to be made. For me, getting the chance to reconnect with my brothers and some other friends that I, previously knew from New Guinea, that definitely made a difference too, because it was a chance to reconnect with them. So I had that to look forward to coming back to Canada. But yeah, at the same time, it was definitely like a very, very large feeling of loss. And especially for the first like 3 or 4 months that I was home, like it was pretty tough.
Yeah. So like when you graduated, what was your path that you took? Did you go straight to college or Bible school, or what career path did you take after graduating?
So when I finished up at Nomina Christian Academy, I came straight back to Canada. And at that point, I was not at all sure on what I wanted to do for college or university. So to me, I was like, I don't want to spend the money just for the sake of doing a degree. And partially because I just wasn't in the mind frame of wanting to go to school yet, but partially because I just talked to a lot of people that had gone down that route and were super disappointed. They had been like, oh, I'm just going to jump in, I'm going to go do school. And then they'd get through like 1, 2, 3 years of university and be like, well, I don't like my major. I don't understand why I'm doing this, that kind of stuff. And they would change, or I think there was just a lot of kind of wasted time and money. And so I didn't want to do that. And so initially I was basically just working part-time jobs, and I did some manual labors and a couple of different jobs here and there. And I think I needed that personally to kind of just be like, okay, this is what a dead end job looks like, and I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And that kind of clicked. And then it was like, okay, now I need to, get it together and try to find something that I can enjoy doing. And so I took about pretty close to a year before I jumped into college. It took me a bit of time to kind of just be like, okay, yeah, I definitely do want to go to school. So I was starting up college pretty close to the year mark, because I was only just barely in college when my parents headed back to New Guinea. So initially I was just doing a bunch of aptitude tests and kind of figuring out, what am I good at? What am I passionate about? That kind of stuff. And there's a bunch of things that kind of came up. But like the two big things for me were kind of helping people and high adrenaline, because that's just very much my personality. Like, I'm very much an empath. Like, I very much just love helping people and solving problems. Dad and mom were kind of helping me, so they're kind of just plugging my information into different schools, different programs that they thought I might be interested in. And so that one day I was just sitting at my job, and I get this call from a guy from Trios College. And at the time, I literally had no idea where the school was, what it was about, what program, nothing. So I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, this is Josh. And the guy starts talking to me like, I know everything about this program. And at this point, I don't know where the school is. I don't know what the school is. I don't know what the program is. And so eventually I was like, hey, man, like, I actually don't even know what program we're talking about. And so he just, kind of backed up and like told me about it. And it was the physiotherapy assistant, occupational therapy assistant program. And so the more he told me about it, I was like, oh, that's kind of appealing, because I had thought about becoming a physiotherapist, and it's just a really big like time and monetary commitment. I just liked the look of the program, and that's where it kind of clicked. I was like, yeah, like, this is something that I could do. And so at that point, I went through the whole process of signing up for college. So by the time my parents had started heading back to New Guinea, I had a car, I had my insurance all sorted out because the school was far enough away that I had to drive. I had part-time work that I could be doing while I was in school to help pay for my bills. Yeah, so I went through the program at that point. About 3/4 of the way through, I was kind of like, like, I don't know if this is for me. I was kind of like, this doesn't really feel like what I want to do. And so as part of my course through college, I got my certification as a personal trainer. And when I had done my practical exam, I had done it at a Good Life Fitness, because the certifying body that I'm certified with as a personal trainer. So anyways, I walked into the Good Life Fitness, and I was kind of like, this is a really cool atmosphere. The people are friendly. They really draw people in.
Is Good Life a Canadian gym?
Yes. As far as I know, they haven't branched down into the US at all. They are, I think if I remember right, they're the third biggest fitness chain in the world.
Really?
They, as far as I know, the stats still are that 1 in 3 Canadians are Good Life members. So it's a really, really big gym. So a huge commercial gym. Like, there's just a lot of things I was like, man, this is kind of cool. So it was a really positive experience for me. And so when I was at the end of my summer of kind of taking time off and just doing some manual labor, I was like, like, this will be something that I would at least look into. And I just felt really good about it. And so I kind of started looking at the different Good Lives in London. I found the closest one to me. So I went and I put my resume in, and honestly, it was the only resume I put in. Like, I didn't send a resume anywhere else, because I was like, this is where I want to work. This is a job that I want. I got a call, I don't know, 3 or 4 days later, and I went in for my interview, and I got the job right on the spot. So yeah, I definitely was like amped to start there. And again, like with personal training anywhere, it takes a bit to build up a client roster and all that kind of stuff. And initially, like, one of the hardest things for me was because I'm very much like an introvert, like talking to people is hard. And so that was the hardest skill for me to learn, because early on, like, even just going out, saying hi, being like, hey, I'm Josh, I'm a new personal trainer here, I just want to introduce myself and say hi. Like, that was a 9 out of 10 effort for me. It just was so mentally taxing.
Do you think that your experiences as a TCK, did that influence your approach to how you do personal training? Like, is there some benefits there?
Like, learning to see the world from different worldviews definitely helped me a lot, just because of the fact that you come into contact with so many different people. It's just like the ability to, get to know people and all that kind of stuff. And like, even just the things that you can, like, as much as you're teaching them, you're also learning from them too, and their viewpoints and how they approach life. I think that definitely helped me to be able to, connect with people more.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier how it was a lot of learning for you, but I feel as a missionary kid or TCK, you had extra learning on top of that, right? Learning to adapt into a new culture and get your driver's license and taxes and all of that, insurance, all that kind of stuff on top of trying to find a job and go to college. That's a lot. So I think by the age of 20, what you had accomplished was pretty good.
Yeah.
So after you came back to Canada, is it easy for you to find a group of friends or people to connect with, or a church group? Or was that a little bit more difficult finding a good friend group again?
I don't know. It was a bit of a mix. For me, I definitely had some friends that I knew. And even when it came to churches in the last 8 years, like, kind of jumped back and forth between, I would say 4 different churches, 2 of them being the main ones. And then I've visited a couple others, and partially it was a little bit of, like depending on where I was living at the time, because I've moved a couple of times. And then again, just like through young adults groups and stuff, there was definitely a lot of friendships to be built there. I found for myself, like the athletic communities have been huge for me. So I play a lot of soccer, a lot of volleyball, a lot of rock climbing. Like there's just a lot of things that I do as far as athletics. And so that's where a lot of my friendships have come from.
Looking back, what are some key lessons you've learned from your unique experience as an MK?
I mean, the ability to kind of like adapt to different cultures, like that's just a very real part of TCK life. So like even coming back to Canada, I found I was kind of a bit of a chameleon. I could kind of fit in wherever I needed to. And that was helpful. Like I found a lot of people like even didn't realize that I was from another country, or, I would tell them that I grew up in Papua New Guinea and they're like, wait, what? You don't have an accent, or that kind of stuff. Those are very, very common things that you hear from people when you first meet them. The age old thing of, the hardest question for TCKs is where's home? Because it's like, how much time do you have? So, because most of the time it's, people are kind of just asking where you live. And then once they get to know you a little bit more, it's all, where did you grow up, or what school did you go to? And then, that's where you can kind of dig into it. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's so cool, like that's very different. And, I don't know, it just turns into a very lengthy conversation. So it's not like a, 30-second thing that for a lot of people, it's when they're asking like, where are you from? It's like, where do you live now? So yeah, being able to adapt to different places and cultures and stuff, I feel was definitely a really valuable life skill. Even like I said, just connecting with people is a super, super valuable skill. Just because like everybody has a very different background. People come from all different walks of life and backgrounds. To be able to kind of see the world through their worldview a little bit and being able to connect with them, I think is a very valuable skill that you learn just as a TCK. Even just like the whole thing of, being able to adapt to change is super valuable. Like even for myself, like just moving to different places, moving into a new house and taking stuff with you, and even like the ability to be a bit of a minimalist so you don't have so much stuff that you're just carting around everywhere. I feel like that was definitely valuable for myself just because of the fact that I've, moved quite a few times even since being in Canada. So yeah. I feel like those are the big ones that come to my mind right off the top of my head.
Yeah, those are all good. You kind of answered our next question too, of how do you define home and how has that definition evolved over time? But like you said, it's just such a hard question to answer, especially for a third culture kid, because home could be many places, right? It's not just one specific country where you were born or where you grew up. I think, yeah, you can have more than one home.
And I feel like for a lot of TCKs, that's kind of how it is. Like you adjust your answer based on who you're talking to. And like even for myself, I kind of changed my answer based on, like who I'm talking to in context and, what they want to know. Because for a lot of people, it's meant to be kind of a short conversation. They don't want to hear your whole life story. So that's where it's like you pick the, I guess, simplest answer. For myself, a lot of times it's just, where do I live now? Because for a lot of people that I've met, that's what they're getting after.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I think, great advice, too, for maybe some TCKs graduating, coming back, is I feel like at least for me, I'm like, but I have such a cool, interesting story. Like, everyone wants to hear it, right? And now, like, they're just making conversation. Just give them a short, simple answer.
All right, Josh. One last question for you. So what is something that the listeners can take away from your story? What is something that you would just leave, some words of wisdom or encouragement you'd leave to the listeners?
As far as transitioning, one of the big things is if you're going through a hard spell with trying to transition to a new country, I definitely will say it does get easier. I don't think anybody finds it to be like a super easy or pleasurable experience. Like it is definitely a big change. But it does get easier, like you do settle into the new space. And one of the big things that helped me is definitely find a community, like whatever you're interested in, whatever you're passionate about. And like I said, for me, that's very much sports and athletics. It's part of the reason I spend so much time in a gym, so much time playing sports. Like that's always been a huge part of my life. And it's something that I'm really, really passionate about. Find those people that are like-minded, because again, like it's one of those things where no matter where you are, you can probably find somebody at least a little bit like-minded as far as like interests, and that, in my experience at least, will help you to form some really meaningful friendships with people that, again, will stay in your life for the long haul. So again, those are the things that kind of make the home away from home. So if you're missing home, having those connections, having those people that you can go to and hang out with and just make some new memories with, it really makes the transition a lot easier.
Yeah, that was great. Very good advice. I think too, yeah, that just finding like those right people to connect with, friends, make all the difference, because if you don't have a group or like an activity that you're interested in, you kind of end up getting lonely and maybe a little bit depressed and wishing and thinking about the things that you used to have or where you used to be. And yeah, so I think that was great advice, just finding those right people and something that you enjoy doing.
Exactly. Like being in community and even just finding a great church that you can find community in is like, it's something that's super important to have. I know it takes time, but there is people out there that want to be your friends, and like you'll be able to find similarities with. So,
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Josh. It was so great to reconnect with you and hear a little bit more about your story.
Yeah, it's been really good. Thanks for having me on.
thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to my friend Josh. We learned a lot from Josh. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to spend it with us. We're excited for next week's episodes.
Yes. If you want to follow us for future episodes, make sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Or if you feel like you have a story to share, feel free to email us at thecolorofhomepodcast@gmail.com. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Stay tuned for next time.